Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in on this Sunday evening. As we get into it, let's get into some of this straight game, man.
Life is like cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. I wanted to have this dialogue on this good Sunday evening, if you will, in reference to the latest and greatest that was going on in the Diddy trial. The top five poignant parts in regards to the closing arguments, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna wait for a couple of other people to come up in here. Give me a second here, and we'll go from here. Let me see something. Got to make a power move real fast. Hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties. I appreciate everybody coming through. Happy Sunday to everybody, if you will. And yeah, it was a lot of interesting things said. Also, one thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that Maureen Comey basically made an accusation in reference to Sean P. Diddy Combs being God, if you will. Right? It was one of the things that she said. She said that he's not God, or he's not a god, if you will. And I really didn't understand where that came from. They had talked about one of Diddy's one of the people that testified in the case said that he was like a god amongst men, if you will. And I don't know how true that is, or how true they want that to be, if you will, from that perspective. But one of the key moments that was key for me, if you will, is the fact that when we talked about hold on for a minute. Let me get us up to speed. So yeah, let's get up to speed like this. When we talk about the facts and dealing with this, one of the top moments, the prosecution, remember the day before they did the closing arguments, if you will, the prosecution showed basically that they weren't withdrawing. They say they weren't withdrawing the claims against Diddy. They made this press release, if you will, of them withdrawing the claims, but when they were making their closing arguments, they basically stayed with it, if you will. Prosecutors triggered the headlines last week that they had backed off of or eliminated claims of arson and kidnapping against Combs, when they said they were moving instructions on the law regarding them being given to jurors on Monday, or basically tomorrow, right? In response to the judge's request to streamline the case for the jury, the government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, ladies and gentlemen. So they were bluffing. So the government has thrown a bluff out there to Diddy's team by making people think, or the public think, they were withdrawn for some of those claims, if you will. They basically came back. The government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are no longer necessary, prosecutors wrote in a letter to the judge. But when Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic launched closings on Thursday, she gave the allegations of arson and kidnapping a starring role. As I was telling you guys when that happened, right? I was like, wow, oh wow. I'm like, they put out like some kind of press release saying that they weren't going to do that, but then in the and I think that was try to throw the defense off so that they wouldn't prepare for that. Right. So if the defense was listening to what they had said in the media, they would be like, oh, we no longer have to deal with that. But that didn't fool Mark Agnifilo not one bit, because he basically covered everything in dealing with that. Right. So, but like I said, it's sad that they have to maneuver like that. If you have evidence, you have evidence. You don't have to lie about what you're going to withdraw and what you're going to include and give new jury instructions and things like that. But like I said, you fight the case how you fight the case, right? Over the last several weeks, we've basically learned a lot about Diddy. You know what I mean? Basically, them claiming that he's the leader of a criminal enterprise. He doesn't take no for an answer. And now you know about many crimes the defendant allegedly committed with members of his enterprise: kidnapping of one of the defendant's employees, arson by trying to blow up a car, forced labor, including of an employee. The defendant repeatedly supposedly assaulted, bribery of a security officer, and keeping damning evidence against the defendant buried, and of course the brutal crimes at the heart of this case, the sex trafficking allegations, right? Like I said, once again, you know, it's funny that the way the mainstream media characterizes things, if you will, right? You know, the mainstream media, they like to characterize things for the most impactful way they can in order to get people to click and view their channel, if you will, right? I understand that. I get that. But like I said, I think they do themselves a disservice when they do that, based on the fact that that wasn't what was really happening in the courtroom. I got to say this to the brother, the channel with soul. I know you're probably watching right now as I speak. He came on my in my comments yesterday talking about the video that I made yesterday when I said that the juries were laughing at P. Diddy's defense, you know, and he was like, I find that your title was very misleading. Once again, I don't throw up misleading titles, and I don't do clickbait, just to let him know. Furthermore, if you look at the title had an exclamation point along with a question mark. It was more of a question. And it was reported by people who were actually in the courtroom, and because the brother from the Soul Channel, or whatever his channel's name is, you know, was talking about, oh, I was in, you know, the overflow room 48 or whatever. Like I said, you are not the only person who has witness or bearing in the facts of what it was, and that was not to say that they were laughing at Mark Agnifilo, or maybe laughing with him, right? The question was, were they laughing, right? Were they laughing at him? Like I said, it could have been in a you know, the way he was breaking it down, because he was being sarcastic in a lot of what he was saying. So I want to say that, like I said to the brother with the Soul Channel, if you'd like to debate this, man, you know, I'm open to debate this. You know, I mean, I see you're a very highly intelligent brother, and I respect what you're doing. Like I said, more importantly, but your mischaracterization as to my title is unbecoming, if you will, and not true at all. I understand that you feel like you are the leading authoritative discussion here, but you're not. And simply you're not. But like I said, I respect what you're doing. And like I said, we've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks in regards to you know, Diddy and you know, the things that he's been alleged to be involved in, right? And like I said, we know the arson claim stems from the firebombing of, or I wouldn't even call it firebombing, because like I said, once again, these incendiary words, right? You know, AI is writing a lot of these articles for these news organizations now, right? There was no firebombing of Kid Cudi's car. Like I said, it wasn't even, it didn't even really catch on fire, if you will. It was an attempt, but it failed, if you will, right? The kidnapping allegations against Capricorn Clark, Cassie, and all of the other things, right? But really, truly, honestly, Mark Agnifilo, he belittled the government's case. Mark Agnifilo, in at times folksy presentation, spared few theatrics in mocking the government's case against Combs as overreach, saying hundreds of agents poured into Combs' residences in Miami and Los Angeles to seize hundreds of bottles of baby oil and Astroglide, as if it was hundreds of kilos of cocaine, and which is simply wasn't, right? He said, I guess it's all worth it because they found Astroglide. They found it in boxes of Astroglide taken off the streets. Whew. You know what I mean? You say, I really feel better already. You know, the streets of America are safe from the Astroglide. Ladies and gentlemen, they found what was all to be five pills, 5 Valium pills, if you will, right? And they're talking about drug trafficking and all of these other things. It simply wasn't a case of none of that. But tomorrow we're going to see how it goes down, what kind of instructions that the jury gets from the judge. You know, from the start, Mr. Agnifilo portrayed prosecutors as unjustly targeting Combs after his former girlfriend of 11 years, Cassie Ventura, sued him for the $30 million, right? She only testified for 4 days. They had the young lady Mia on the stand longer than they had Cassie on the stand, right? Basically, they exposed Mia, they exposed Breonna Bongelin, they exposed all of the witnesses. If you ask me, and like I said, I was covering it, you know, the gavel to gavel through Inner City Press and a few other X channels, right? Who were inside the courtroom actually broadcasting live. We know the lawsuit was settled for $20 million the next day, but she touched off a criminal probe with her allegations being subject to hundreds of drug-fueled freak-offs, right? As if that were criminal. You know what I mean? So they wanted the government basically, they were drug-fueled freak-offs. One thing I will say that, like I said, the Mark Agnifilo, Diddy's attorney, nobody said that they were prostitutes. You know what I mean? If you paid strippers and they were male dancers or whatever, to come there and they say, okay, cool, I don't see nothing wrong with that. They said that they ended up having, you know, sexual relations, but many times Diddy watching and so on and so forth. I don't think that, I don't see that as illegal. I see that as what Mark Agnifilo considered it a swinger lifestyle. That's what Diddy was doing. That's what he was into. Everybody was with it. You know what I mean? It's not until it's like the nosy next door neighbor saying, I don't agree with that. I don't think they should be doing that in the neighborhood. You know, it was as if the government was basically betrayed as the nosy next door neighbor, basically trying to out what these people were doing in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And like I said, Jane, who testified under a pseudonym, Daphne Joy, also testified during the trial that she experienced hotel nights similar to freak-offs in a relationship with Combs from 2021 until current, which is Diddy is still paying her rent. You know what I mean? They said that Diddy was using the rent as leverage. I don't know how he could be using it as leverage right now while he's sitting in jail. Any other person would have cut that off or simply wouldn't have been able to afford it based on the fact that they would be more focused on trying to pay their legal fees. We understand that Diddy has long money, right? Agnifilo also maintained the prosecution was an unjust attack on a prominently and wildly successful black entrepreneur. You know, I think that has something to do with it. Like I said, you could be a lawyer, you could be a police officer, but you still bring your biases as to who you are, where you're from, and all of those things on your job with you. You cannot leave them totally at home. As much as they'd like to think that they want us to think that they're robots, and I don't feel that way, you do. And I don't care who you are, you know what I mean? Everybody has their personal biases, and it's hard to really look at it from that perspective. Like I said, the God thing that came up in regards to that, right? And so so they took the Astroglide thing, right? The baby oil, and that ends up being the evidence in this case, right? That's basically it. Astroglide and baby oil, and people went crazy when they first came out with this information about the baby. People went crazy with the memes. It was like, wow. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, don't you know that you're mocking yourself? Just like Mr. Agnifilo said, that there's a threat that anybody who may be involved with the swinger lifestyle may face criminal charges, if you will, right? And that's, like I said, for most people that don't know, that's a big thing that people do. They just don't tell you about it, right? Basically said there's nothing about the business defined. There's nothing about the businesses to make into a criminal case. We know Bad Boy Records. We know all of those things. We've seen the growth from Big E, from Andre Harrell, from Uptown Records, Diddy being an intern, the parties he used to throw at Howard University, all of that. We've seen that from the ground up. You can't now say, oh, all of that was some part of some RICO criminal enterprise, as if he got dope money from some dope deal on the street and then, formed his label with drug proceeds and all of the things like they were trying to do with Death Row at one time, right? They were trying to do that with Death Row with the Harry O situation. And somehow, some way, it didn't file through. They actually, the Interscope, under the table, paid Harry O off. You see, Harry O is out of prison now because basically it was said that Harry O gave Suge Knight and Death Row through David Kenner approximately $1 million to $2 million to help with the funding of Death Row, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if they were going to go for a case like that, that would be more of something that one could link to something as far as a racketeering, a conspiracy involving drugs and things of that nature from that, but they didn't. But here they did it to Diddy based on something that Cassie said that they was having freak offs, and now it turns into some kind of sex trafficking thing. It just blows my mind. That's just from me. You know what I mean? Everybody feels different. And basically they were saying that there's nothing about the business that was criminal, ladies and gentlemen. The defense personalizes the case for jurors, calling an attack on your bedroom. Agnifilo tried to cast the case for the jury as an attack on everyone's bedroom and the secrets of one's sex life. That is a fact. So while people out here rooting and tooting about certain stuff, you better be careful. Better be careful of what you're asking for. It's like, who you like to vote for. 1 minute they're telling you one thing and then they do another. They say basically, he said they go into the man's bedroom. They go into the man's most private life. Where's the crime scene? Like, where's the crime scene? They didn't show us where no money was being made from these people being sex trafficked or none of that, right? The crime scene is your private sex life. That's the crime scene, he said as he stood before jurors who were largely expressionless as they took occasional notes and watched the closings, right? The lawyer said it was uncommon that Combs liked to film sexual events with his girlfriends, right? It was not uncommon. I'm sorry. Agnifilo said it was not uncommon that Combs liked to film sexual events with his girlfriend, calling it sort of typical, homemade porn, and adding that I don't think by any stretch of the imagination this is the only man in America making homemade porn. Still, he said investigators take yellow crime scene tape figuratively, and they wrap it around his bedroom crime scene, your bedroom, your hotel rooms, where you go with your girlfriend's crime scenes. A lot of yellow tape, basically, right? And then he gave a nod to the 50th anniversary of the movie Jaws, resurrecting a classic line from the Hollywood history when he said, "We need a bigger roll of crime scene tape because that's just not," he said, "because that's just not going to be enough," right? It's not. They didn't present any real evidence, ladies and gentlemen. Also, the judge agrees the defense went too far by saying the prosecution targeted Combs. A lot of people that felt like that Judge Submarine was biased. Like I said, it is what it is. It's gonna break down how it breaks down. Judge Agnifilo told jurors it takes a lot of courage to acquit. He ripped the government's case a final time in stark terms, saying the trial was very different from any other trial. I think the evidence shows, and you can conclude that the government's targeting of Sean Combs, he said, noting that nobody complained to the government to instigate a probe, but the investigators instead began their work a day after Cassie filed the lawsuit. Right? Facts. After the jury left the room at the conclusion of Agnopoulos' 4-hour summation, his statement about targeting drew an outcry from the prosecutors, Slavic. When the jury returned, Judge Ernst Submaranian noted that the remark Agnopoulos had made about targeting Combs told jurors the decision of the government to investigate an individual or the decision of a grand jury to indict an individual is none of your concern. What? If I was a juror, I'd take that person. What you mean it's none of my concern? Hell yeah, it's my concern. I'm an American. Right? If you sitting on the jury, every part of the process of the legal system is your concern. The judge said when the jury returned, Judge Ernst Submaranian noted that the remark Agnopoulos made about targeting Combs and told the jurors that the decision of the government to investigate an individual or the decision of a grand jury to indict an individual is none of your concern. Oh, yes, it is, even though you tell me that it's not. So when you tell me something that it's not, I'm going to look at it a little bit. What do you mean? You know, right? Like I said, in rebuttal, prosecutors tell jurors that Sean P. Diddy Combs is not a god, right? Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey got the final word with the rebuttal presentation to the jurors, telling them the defendant is not a god. What the hell does that mean? Right? She said that Combs in his mind, because she was in his mind, was untouchable, right? So if he can't say that, then how can she say that what Diddy thought in his mind that he was untouchable? She don't know that, but there you go. That's why people feel like there's a lot of bias going on. She noted that one former personal assistant even described him as a god among men. For 20 years, the defendant got away with his crimes. 20 years? They didn't link anything back 20 years, ladies and gentlemen. That ends in this courtroom, she said. He is a person, and in this courtroom, he stands equal before the law. Overwhelming evidence proves his guilt. It is time to hold him accountable. Find him guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't really know if they're going to find Sean P. Diddy Combs guilty. I think it's going to be very hard for a jury of his peers to basically find him guilty of a charge or come to a conclusion on a verdict, ladies and gentlemen. But we're going to see. And we're going to see how hard the judge holds Diddy to account, or should I say the jury to account, to force them to come up with some kind of a verdict, if you will. So we're going to see what happens with that, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, once again, to all of the people who have been supporting and who have been down and dirty with Straight Game TV.
They said Tupac was untouchable, but behind the walls of Rikers Island, he was just a man, wounded, watching his back, and wondering who he could trust. He survived bullets, betrayal, and isolation behind bars. But what happened inside those walls has never been told until now. In the darkest corner of Rikers, he found betrayal and a brotherhood no one saw coming. These dudes smiled in my face, then flipped and tried to kill me, and I never saw it coming. They were Puff's security, Biggie's muscle, Henchman's people, and Tupac knew exactly who sent them. This is the side of Tupac Shakur the world never got to see, told by the man who lived it with him, not in the studio, but in a 6x9 cell. The rap battles, sex and drama with female guards, the tears, the silence after Jada Pinkett's visit, and the moment Tupac almost broke. Before Death Row, before All Eyes on Me, before Machiavelli, there was Rikers. Behind the walls with Tupac Shakur, Available now on Amazon. Get your copy. Learn the truth.
Like I said, to all of the people who've been supporting Straight Game TV, we appreciate you very much. And like I said, the thing that blew my mind about this situation was the fact that when the prosecutor came with the God thing, you know, that really hit me. It's like, he's not a God. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Is that a racial trope at Diddy because he's a black man and Jesus is known to be black, or the fact that, you know, the true fact about Jesus and the origins of God and all of those things from that perspective, was that one of those things, right? So like I said, I don't understand that. Even though one of the personal assistants described him as a god among men, right? Like I said, once again, you know, there's always been the description of Jesus as being a white guy, right? And we've seen that in the courts. So I don't really know what they meant when they went after that, right? In rebuttal, prosecutors, and they basically closed their case with that, basically saying prosecutors tells juries that Combs is not a god, right? And like I said, I don't think the jurors, after all of that testimony about all of the sex and drug use and all of that, I don't think that they would see him as a god at all. I think they see him as a junkie, you know, as somebody who has a drug problem or who had a drug problem. You know what I mean? So the fact that they touched on that and said that he's not a god, you know, it sounds like an undertone to me. You know, one of those tropes. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, we're still going to see what happens from this point on. Tomorrow, they get down to it, ladies and gentlemen. Your boy DELRAY, Straight Game TV, Straight Game. Holla back. Leave a comment. Tell me what you guys think.